Curt Carstensen here for another episode of People I Know Show. Today, joined by Leonard.
Yeah.
Hello, Ro.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. You are someone relatively new to my life.
Yeah.
But it's currently a Monday. We're in Crete, an island south of Greece, a part of Greece. I first met you on Tuesday, and we've been together a lot in about a week's time.
Wow, you have a much better order of time than I do.
Is it that I have a better order of time, or that you've been living this life of traveling and not really having time as important? Not the traveling part, the fact that for much of the last however many months, I forget how many it is for you, you can tell me, you've been doing a thing where the day doesn't matter, the time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm still in that American, got to know when stuff's happening. Maybe you've left that. Or maybe you've always left that.
I would say probably more so have always left that. But yeah, it's been about, 4 months in Europe, and I was traveling for about a month in America before that. But I don't know, I guess I have a history of not paying attention to the days. I like to spend a lot of time in the woods and doing things without time restrictions. So I kind of end up not paying too much attention to the days. Sometimes it's important. It is important. But, you know, one of my favorite experiences is when you're with a group of people that you've been spending a lot of time with for like a week or 2 weeks or something. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, what day is it? And then everybody together is like, what day is it? Man, I have no idea what day it is. And then you end up realizing that you've lost a day, or that everyone thought it was a day that it wasn't. And yeah.
I've had the experience of not remembering the day and taking a little bit of time to figure it out. I haven't had that experience where no one knows. And I think that's a beautiful thing. This time and days and calendars and schedules is a part of many people's lives, but you've said for a long time this is something you're not really concerning yourself with, trying not to.
Trying not to.
Did you like at a certain point in your life were you constricted by schedules, and you realized you just don't want it anymore and started doing things differently, or how did it really come about where you maybe grew out of the thing that you were raised on? I'm assuming you were raised on it, not so different than I. You know, time and dates kind of matter at a certain point in life. Yeah.
So some sort of a structure. I guess it's all sort of part of my grander scheme of living. In terms of there are things that I hold as goals or ambitions or wants, but really on the most fundamental level, my biggest goal in life is to live as freely as I can, and with actively choosing to do whatever I want to do in any given moment. Never doing anything that I'm not actively choosing to do. And one of those things for me has been living a life with as little rigidity and with as little structure, with as little reliance on needing to be at a certain place at a certain time. I mean, sometimes jobs can kind of restrict that a little bit, but you know, I try and spend as much time as I can in the woods, and I try and spend as much time as I can free of working. That
makes sense to me. I want to get into the in the wood thing to really fully understand what you're doing in the woods. I can venture guesses, but I want to know from you.
Yeah.
But when you said that, it made me smile, because that, when you're talking about the free of schedules and doing what you want to do as much as humanly possible at this day and age, just not your words, those are mine, but that's what I'm working towards. I've designed my life where I have jobs, I have ways I make income, but as much as ever, I feel like I work when I want to. And that's something that I don't know if people strive for that commonly. I don't think that many people have. Even people that run their own businesses sometimes feel very much in need to always be working or something.
Right.
I have a pretty good situation with that, but I'm not at all at the end of where I want to be. And then I look at you and hear from you, and you're talking about being in the woods. That doesn't necessarily interest me that much, but I think you're way further ahead than me in that regard. So explain this in the woods thing and what do you got going on when you're doing that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think further ahead is really a subjective thing. I mean, everyone is just on the path that they're on at whatever place that they're on. But I think that very early on, and by very, very early on, I mean a few years ago, I'm very young, after I did 1 year in college and was like, that's not for me, I was like, okay, well then what is for me? And I was like, well, I have a job right now and I don't like that. I don't like paying rent and living on a month-to-month basis and always feeling like at any point I could suddenly tumble into complete chaos if I didn't have this source of income that's not a very big source of income. So very early on, my biggest goal in life was to escape wage slavery, which is where I feel a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. Certainly the majority of Americans are, in terms of people not being able to save money, people that are being indebted. And I find myself extremely fortunate to not be in any sort of a debt. I've never accrued a large amount of credit debt. I've never had any serious injuries that have left me with medical debt, and I've only gone to university for 1 year, which means that I was able to successfully pay it off. And I come from certainly not a wealthy family, but a lower middle class family, which means that I'm able to pay off my school in a reasonable amount of time, and finding myself free of debt is really the biggest thing to this, because escaping wage slavery is a thing of privilege. I mean, so many people are in debt, and so many people are actively being put down in society to the point where that's not really an option for them. So I do really count my privilege as much as I can, but it became a very big goal for me to escape this wage slavery. And then at a certain point I was like, well, like at what point is wage slavery just having a job? And at what point is it actually wage slavery? Like at what point am I being forced to do this to stay alive? And at what point am I choosing to do this to reward myself with some sort of freedom?
Okay.
And because of that, I slowly started to get out of the jobs that I didn't like to do, and I started doing the jobs that I wanted to do, which didn't always result in the most amount of money. And then sometimes I had to leave the job that I wanted to do in order to continue to sustain myself.
So you'd have to go back to a job you didn't want to do for a while because there was more money involved?
Right. I never worked at a place that I was completely opposed to working to, but having to take jobs to get yourself by is something that I've certainly had to do. But I found a really, really, really amazing opportunity of work back home that allowed me to make a good amount of money and do something I was really passionate about. It was more work than I've ever put into anything. Mm-hmm. And this was selling produce, selling vegetables, roadside, where I worked as an independent contractor, with big old air quotes, where I would show up in the morning and I would grab a truck full of vegetables that I, air quotes, bought for $0. And then I would drive out to a roadside and sell those vegetables all day long. And then I would come back and I would sell whatever I didn't sell back to the people who provided it to me, and then keep 20% of whatever I sold.
Okay.
And because of this, my average wage ended up being something like $15 an hour, all in cash, not needing to be super scrutinized. And this resulted in, I was working, before finding this job, I was working in a pizza place that I loved, but I was making $7.50 an hour, and just could not save up anything. And I was still actively trying to pay rent, and it just felt like this idea of travel that I've held for a long time was completely unattainable, to all of a sudden being like, okay, we can save money now. Like, we can save money and we can do this. Like, we can do this. It's right there. You can do it. And then I did it. I mean, it was 14 to 16 hours every day, and I worked 6 days a week. So I was working at least 70 to 80 to 90 hours every week. But it was work that I wanted to do. It was work that every day I was outside surrounded by what I loved most, vegetables, and talking to people and finding passion with other people in those vegetables and really loving what I was doing and actively choosing to be there. And it was the first time that I was really like actively choosing to be there. Like I really stopped hanging out with most of my friends because I didn't have very much time, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, like you poor thing, you're working like 90 hours a week." I'm like, I love it. Like I'm out all day. Like I'm paying attention to the sun. I love vegetables. All I'm eating right now is just vegetables. It's
0
amazing.
calories.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. Raw diet without trying to be a raw diet. Yeah, just eating vegetables and vegetables and vegetables. Finding other people that love vegetables as much as I do is
and I suppose
super
the
rewarding.
Type of people that are stopping to buy the vegetables from you, you're going to relate to often in some other ways because that's your people.
Yeah. You get a very big mix of people, but you see so many people that like you see people that come by that don't know anything about vegetables but love vegetables, and then it's like, great, I'm so excited to teach you about vegetables. And then you see some people who come by and are like, yeah, like the kernels on your corn are a little bit too small, and I'd be like, yeah, I know, it was a little bit of a dry season, but things are coming around a little bit, and it's still very, very sweet. And like starting to work with people and talk with people and getting to teach people, and especially kids that come by. Kids get so excited about all sorts of different vegetables, especially when it gets to pumpkin season, and it's like being able to teach a kid how to pick out a good watermelon. One of the highlights of my life, like having a kid that like really listens to you and is like, oh, this is what I'm looking for, and then like picking up watermelons, being like, is this a good one? And being like, yeah, you've learned how to pick out a good watermelon. You nailed it. It was like some of the most happy people I've ever been. Like a phrase that started to come up a lot during this time was, nobody's pissed off when they're stopping at a vegetable stand. Like if you're pissed off and you're driving down the road and you see a vegetable stand, you don't stop for those vegetables. If you're happy and you want to get vegetables, you stop at the vegetable stand. Like, I don't know, I'd say the entire time I encountered maybe 2 or 3 angry people, and most people that stop are just overwhelmingly happy and so overjoyed.
You're selling a product that you want to sell and you believe in.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people that the vast majority are in a great mood and easy to work with, deal with.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good place to be.
Yeah, and making more money than I've ever made doing any
Twice
other
as
job.
much per hour plus like twice the hours.
Yeah. It was pretty remarkable, and it awarded me the freedom to then spend 5-6 months just traveling, and I have plans to keep doing that for at least right now my flight back is in 4 months, so it will have been about 9 to 10 months of traveling, just based off of like 2 months of work.
4 months from now, we're looking at, it's 4, 6, middle of the summer. That's like prime vegetable season. You can go back to that gig.
It's exactly what I'm going back for.
So you can do that, work constantly, make a bunch of money, and do it all over again if you want.
Exactly my plan.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
You figured it out, Ro.
Yeah. I mean, it's as close as I've gotten to my goal from years back of escaping wage slavery. It is still working for a wage, but in no way do I feel a slave to that wage. I'm awarded more freedom than I've ever had ever in my life, and I have the freedom to do this. So, yeah.
I love that we're having this conversation because I think about this often enough to have gotten to the point where I'm at. Is the thought that continues to occur to me, how can I have my own schedule, get what I want? If I'm going to trade my time for money, I'm trading in a way that I feel neutral to good about, not ever bad about. Mm-hmm. And I think that's your thought process resembles mine, and you found a system. You're trying it for the first year, it seems.
Yeah.
But it's worked well. You're getting all these experiences and meeting people and going to other places. We can get into some of that in a bit. I don't want us to be the only two that are thinking that way. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that think that way, and I think there's an even bigger amount of people that think that way but don't know how to do it.
Yes.
And I think that that's why talking to people and like sharing how to do it and sharing the ways that it can be easy is so important. Because I've met people that are like just right on the brink of doing it, that like all they want to do is travel, or all they want to do is like live life in a free way, and they're just so close to doing it. They just don't know how to, switch some of those levers to get there and to start doing it. And what those levers are is different for everybody. But I think there are probably some universal levers, so to speak, of how to change your mindset before you change anything in reality. Mm-hmm. Like you don't need to have a high-paying job. You don't need to be completely devoid of debt. But the first steps are for most people to start switching your mindset into a mindset where you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish the things. It's not as easy as that, but those are some of the first levers.
It's never easy. I did say some words. I strung together some words a few nights ago, and I think you wrote it down. I believe I said, first you got to release, then you can do. Something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing right now in this moment in time, we're attached to it in some way, some much greater, some much less. But there's an attachment that you need to release before the next thing can happen. Because sometimes if you try to do while still having, it doesn't work out so well. So there needs to be a sense of, okay, this can end. If it needs to end, this can end, and then I can do this next thing. Yeah,
and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but I mean, uncomfortability breeds comfortability. It's been a very big motto of my life lately. That, like when you get uncomfortable, it's when you realize how comfortable some things can be. When you quit your job and start looking for alternative ways to make money, and you start looking for alternative ways to get yourself to where you want to be, that's uncomfortable. You might spend some of your time uncomfortable, but all of a sudden you get all of this comfort of, oh wow, like I suddenly don't need to do that job that I hated, and I suddenly am able to, like if you're lacking something in your life, if you are lacking, the extra income to go out to eat or to go out to a bar with your friends or something like that, sometimes that can feel unfortunate, but then, man, like the one time that it happens, you've never appreciated going out to eat more than that. You've never appreciated being with your friends more than that. And even so, even if you don't end up going out to a bar with your friends, having your friends over to your place or going to your friend's place has never felt as good as when you felt like you couldn't do it. Uncomfortability breeds comfortability. So releasing those things that feel comfortable now will make you feel uncomfortable, but it will make you realize how much more comfortable you are without those attachments.
You're suggesting that we should walk into the things that make us uncomfortable, knowing that better things will happen on the other side.
Right, barring maybe like physical safety, things like that, or
some discretion needed.
Yeah. People with families, don't necessarily quit your job and let your kids starve, but in most scenarios, walk into the thing that makes you uncomfortable.
And I think it's the human nature that we're like pushed away from that because of what we feel inside. But if you can build a logical structure around that and just kind of ignore the feelings long enough to just go for it, I know I don't do it all the time.
Yeah,
I've done it, and that's every time I do it, I come out on the other side knowing, okay, that's worth it. That wasn't that hard. Those types of things hit me like, oh, why was I so afraid of that?
Yeah. Like I feel like I have a lot of anxiety in my life, and I have a lot of these things in my life. And recently I've been thinking about this in terms of that I feel like one of the most at peace, anxiety-ridden people that you'll ever meet, in terms of, like, I keep pushing myself into uncomfortable things, and I keep feeling anxiety about them. Like, I don't feel comfortable with everything, but I know that if I keep doing the uncomfortable thing, it'll keep getting better, and the better on the other side is progress from where I was before, which means that it was worth it, to me.
I totally can relate to that, and I think those are important lessons to have gained for yourself and also to share. I have 4 fingers holding up now because as I learned this from Moss.
Yeah,
we may talk about Moss here a little bit if the chronology works. There will have been a podcast first with them. Okay, that's someone will understand it if you've listened to the one that's probably labeled Mariah Schumacher. This will all tie together. That was yesterday. I'm on this 2-week journey. This is the second of maybe 4 conversations I recorded this time. We'll see what the future holds. And this is interesting to me because I don't usually do things this way. And we've mentioned we're here in Crete, which is, a place we'd never been before, and we're sharing some time here and saw some beautiful things today, and there'll be photos that I'll attach to this and all that. But getting back to the 4 fingers, yesterday Moss was trying to remember some things, and she was holding her fingers up. So I have 4 things here. I'm going to get rid of 2 of them quickly, because I feel like I just want to learn everything right now. 2 of them involve watermelons. Are watermelons a vegetable, or if not, were you also selling some fruits?
They're a fruit, and when I say that I was selling vegetables, most of what I was selling was fruits. Cucumbers are fruits, zucchinis are fruits, peppers are fruits, corn is a fruit. The only thing I was selling that was vegetables was technically potatoes and carrots.
Really?
Yeah.
The whole how we distinguish fruits and vegetables is it based strictly on how they're like growing?
Where the seeds are.
Where the seeds are.
Yeah. So anything that contains the seed within it is a fruit. So a cucumber has the seeds on the inside of it. So even though we oftentimes think about a cucumber as a vegetable, it's a fruit. Tomatoes have the seeds inside of it. It's a fruit.
Okay. So we think of fruits and vegetables based on, like, I think a juiciness maybe type of thing. At least that's, this is juicy, it's a fruit. This is hard, it's a vegetable. When raw.
But when I say that I was a vegetable seller, and this did get pointed out to a lot of comedic effect while selling those produce, was that most of it really is fruits, watermelons and cantaloupes.
You sound more passionate about vegetables, so call them all vegetables.
I've tried to transition into saying that I'm passionate about produce rather than I'm passionate about vegetables.
Okay, well, I feel like I learned something there. That a bunch of things that I thought were fruits are not, or that thought were vegetables are not the fruits. And then watermelon is one of my favorite things to eat. And I think I've gotten better at picking a good one when I go to the supermarket. Maybe I should come to your stand in the future. Assuming I'm not there at a similar stand, I'm in the old... I shop at Aldi. I don't know what their produce is and how you regard theirs. But if I'm in Aldi and I see their watermelons, which one should I be looking for?
So it depends on what you're looking for, but primarily most people want sweeter watermelons.
For sure.
So the ones that are spherical rather than oblong are going to be sweeter.
Spherical, okay.
Yeah.
Like the ones that look more like a ball more like a...
Yeah, it's a female versus male watermelon.
What?
I think it's the long ones are male, the round ones are female. It could be the other way around, but the round ones are sweeter.
Okay.
The biggest one to tell is the webbing, like the brown net sort of looking formations that form on the rind of watermelon. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I would like to look at 2 of them right now, but we don't have them. So
So it looks like webbing. The one that has more webbing or like bigger webbing is going to be way sweeter. Way sweeter. The other ways to tell are from the stem, but almost always the stem is cut off. So you can't really tell from that. So the biggest way that I tell people is the webbing that is on them. The one that has the most webbing on it is... the one that's going to be way sweeter. The thing that I always tell people, which I gotta admit I'm pretty sure is a total lie, but it is a lie that I keep perpetuating because people really like to hear it. And it's the way that I first learned about the webbing is that the webbing is actually the marks of pollinators in the field. So bees and hornets cannot pierce the rind of a watermelon because the watermelon rind is too thick. But they try, and they can detect which watermelon has more glucose and more sugar in it. So the one that has more webbing, the webbing is literally the marks of the pollinators trying to pierce it over and over and over again.
You don't think it's true, though? You just say this?
I'm really not sure, and I'm choosing to not look it up because if it is a lie, it's got to be my favorite lie to tell people about watermelons, and everybody loves it. But yes, it is true that the one that has the more webbing is going to be much sweeter.
Okay.
Spherical, a lot of webbing. If you find one that's all dark, like all dark green with no stripes on it, it's a different variety of watermelon, and it will be the sweetest watermelon you have ever put in your mouth.
So we want that.
Yeah. They're called black diamond watermelons. It's a specific
all
variety.
Dark, no webbing, but that goes against your webbing thing that you just
No. All dark, no stripes.
No stripes.
No stripes. Like how normally a watermelon is like dark green or green with like light green stripes on it. If you find one that looks like a massive dark grape, like it'll be spherical and it'll be all dark green. That'll be the sweetest watermelon you've ever eaten in your life.
The likelihood of us talking about watermelon so much right now, I would have bet. I wouldn't have bet on that. It's been so unlikely. But now I think maybe this will be the last episode of my podcast. I've learned how to find the best watermelon. Let's shut it down. I'll just eat watermelons every day.
The purpose has been fulfilled.
Okay. Well, don't Google. I Googled the best watermelon, how to pick the best watermelon, and I got totally different answers. And maybe they're correct as well. Should I even say them?
I don't know. What do you know?
I think it was something to do with the bigger the spot that it was, like if it was sitting on the ground longest, so the discoloration, the yellow whitish spot.
Yeah.
The more of that is better because it was in the field longer or something like that.
It has more to do with what color the spot is. If it's a yellowish spot, that means that it's probably well ripened. If it's a white spot, it means that it was picked too early and it's going to be less sweet.
Okay, so that's probably what Google said and I just forgot.
But it could be the same with the spot on the ground because that spot is from where it was sitting in the field. Mm-hmm. So if it's a big one, then either it's going to be a super sweet, super ripe watermelon, or it's going to be overripe and disgusting and mushy on the inside.
Okay, we don't want that.
Yeah.
The other was somehow like knocking on it. The more hollow it sounds, the better.
Bullshit.
Okay.
Totally.
We cut to the BS today.
Yeah. Totally not true. I see people come up to my stand all the time.
Knocking on them?
Yeah, just pick up every single one and knock on it. I'll just be like, play your games. You can pick out whichever one you like. Yeah.
Good. That was 2 of my 4 fingers. Okay. Other one, they still haven't answered what you do in the woods. I know you told me you traveled for a month before coming to Europe, and some of that I think involved you being in the woods. Maybe it was before that.
Well,
what are you doing? How do you spend a day in the woods when you have nothing else going on?
It's interesting because I actually wasn't including my woods travels in that chronology because I go to the woods a lot. I was probably in the woods for about a month before leaving on traveling around America for a month before leaving to come to Europe. I love the woods. In the
woods, I feel like that's definitely a thing in Minnesota we call forest area woods. I don't know if other people do elsewhere.
Yeah, national park, foresty area.
Just within nature and nothing modern, like no business commerce. You're away from it within nature only. Right,
and in Minnesota that usually means, like maybe the nearest store will have some very basic necessities and will be about like a half hour to 45-minute drive away. We have there's a camp spot that me and my group of friends have loved for a very long time. It was formerly a campground, like a held up campground by like a company, and the company went under and the government bought the campground. And in the United States, national parks, you can camp there for free for up to like 3 months or something like that, in what's called dispersed camping. Unless it's otherwise set aside for something else, you can camp anywhere in any national park for up to 3 months. Something like that.
Okay.
Maybe it's 2 months. So this place that used to be a campground that went under and then got bought out by the government, they still maintain it as a campground. So they still have like camp areas with like fire rings and things like that. They even have little toilets in the ground that they even pump clean once every year. And you can just camp there for free for months at a time with nobody bothering you. And that's been our place for years and years. We first learned about it from a local who is a good friend of ours who throws a music festival out there once every year.
That's cool.
Yeah. That festival is very awesome. I'm going to it this year while I'm back in the U.S. It starts, the festival is the weekend before my produce job starts. So it's like my last hurrah before...
Oh, what perfect timing.
Yeah. So it's really just sustaining yourself in the woods. And like, I hear a lot when it comes to being in the woods, like, don't you get bored? Like, what do you do for like weeks and weeks and weeks in the woods? Like, well, being in the woods is kind of tiring. Like, you wake up with the sun in the morning, maybe have a slow morning, maybe have a little bit of breakfast or something, maybe have some coffee. And then it's like, okay, so now we have to gather wood for the night and for the fire and for cooking and for everything else. Need to clean any dishes or clean anything else that's been going on. Need to take care of these small responsibilities around camp. Maybe need to build a new structure. Maybe need to reposition things throughout the day. Keeping things in the shade, things like that. Always trying to improve the environment in which you're living. If that's building new structures, like, you could spend an entire day just going and finding 4 big logs, digging holes in the ground, putting these big logs as stakes in the ground and building a roof over those. And then suddenly, by the end of the day, you have a new structure. But like, that's a whole day, and that's a tiring day.
And you've spent days doing this.
Oh, yeah. And it's always kind of fun to leave stuff like that behind for whoever comes afterwards, because then they'll show up and have this weird little structure. I've never had one last more than a year. Like, if we've been camping there one weekend and then, that might be our last weekend there, and we build all these wild structures, and then we come back the next year and they're all gone, and I don't know what happened to them, but I hope that someone enjoyed them. And then the other thing I really like to do out there is agate collecting. Agates are a type of gemstone that are in Minnesota, very much so. They're all over the world, but Minnesota is really known for them. Lake Superior agates. They're beautiful. They're amazing. And pretty much anywhere in Minnesota that you see rock, you can find agates. Little rocks, you can find agates. So we spend a lot of time when we're in the woods, like maybe accomplish one task and then be like, all right, let's go and look for agates for a couple hours. Then come back and accomplish another task, and then, all right, let's go and look for agates for a couple hours. So usually end up spending a lot of our days doing that. And really, I mean, just walking around in the sun, being in the elements is tiring to your body. So by the time the sun is setting, you're exhausted and you're ready to go to bed, and then wake up the next morning and do it all over again. And it's great. It's great. The only thing that ever limits my time in the woods is how much money I want to spend on bringing food out there. I'm not really into hunting, and there are some things that you can forage in the woods, but they're primarily like strawberries, and it really depends on the season, and you can't really sustain yourself on just wild strawberries. So have to get some things from stores to bring out into the woods. So that's the main limiter on how long I spend in the woods, really.
Do you learn much of what you learn just by trial and error and the people around you, or do you spend a lot of time researching in some other ways, reading? Like, the things that you've gotten better at, does it come from some distant learning from somewhere else, or does it come from being in it? And I'm sure it's both in some ways, but what do you really focus on? Just experience or some sort of outside learning?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's ever been any sort of like outside learning beyond just the shared experience of the people that I'm with. Like, you know, we've all had our lives that have led us to that point, some of them more in the woods, some of them less in the woods, but everyone has input to give into what's going on at camp. You know, sometimes you might be at camp and nobody wants to cook, and then sometimes someone might show up and be like, oh, I love cooking. I'll cook over a fire every single day. And it's like, great. We're about to have great food all of a sudden. And sometimes that's me, you know. Yeah, I mean, it's really all just about the shared experience of everyone that's there and everyone that's actively doing it.
And people that are there are people that want to be there because it's something they've learned to enjoy.
Yeah. And
or come to enjoy.
Yeah, there have been times when people have come out there because I've been encouraging them to, and other people that have been there have been encouraging them to, and then they get out there and they're like, this is not for me. And it's like, great, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you figured it out. No shame to you for not liking what we're doing out here, but like, you shouldn't stay out here if this isn't what you want to do. Like, definitely don't keep staying out here, because the woods, if you don't like the woods are wickedly uncomfortable. Like, if you don't like the woods, you're not going to enjoy your time being in the woods. I mean, it seems simple, but some people are like, well, but I set aside this weekend to come out here. It's like, well, why do you want to spend your weekend being miserable? You don't like this at all. Like, leave. I would love you to be here. I love your company, but leave. Please leave. Yeah. Rarely, but it has happened.
If I'm with individuals that are really good at like everything and they're okay with me not knowing that much and just helping a little, then it can be a good experience. If like we don't have someone that really knows what they're doing, then I think then it's just not good. Or maybe the numbers are so disproportionate. Like, I've gone with some friends. There's a couple nights, expert campers. You know, not my thing for weeks, but I can enjoy that for a couple nights. If I'm like with my family, sometimes a bunch of us go, and not a lot of us are really the camping type, and we're kind of glampers too because we have a big camper, so it's really not probably at all what you're doing, but it's stepping into that space. It's, you know, I guess it doesn't become really camping. It becomes just living in a house away from the house, which is something that people do.
Yeah. I don't think that there's any amount of shame or less than to that sort of a thing either, because I mean, either way, it's stepping outside of your comfort zone, really. And it's going into the woods and it's experiencing something new, and you know, doing that at all is going to be a growing and learning experience for people, whether or not, you know, like, there certainly is a culture of like you know, people that are going out with like just a hammock and like nothing else, and then they'll scoff at anybody who goes out there with a tent, and then the people in the tent will scoff at anybody who would be going out there with their car, and then they would scoff at anybody who's going out there with their RV. And I've seen so much of that to just be like, well, all of us just want to be in the woods. Like, why does it matter at all? Like, all of us love nature, and all of us are here for a reason. Like, why should it matter at all the way that we want to do it or experience it? Yeah.
You have a very good attitude about just that and just anything, the way you look at it, and the conversation I had with Moss also. It's just what I've learned from the two of you. I hope I've learned. Spending a week with you, it's like really find positive in the things that are going on, not focus on the negatives. I'm a optimistic, positive person, but I realize even sometimes with the two of you that I'm judgmental and negative more than I think I am, and that's something to continue to work on, because just there's happiness and beauty, and it's okay. Let people do what they're doing, and just encourage them when they're like kind of wanting it, needing it, open to it, with ways that they might find what they're looking for if they're not there yet, and you think you can help. And if you can't, maybe just let them be and let them be where they're at.
Yeah. It's always a growth thing. Finding where you're comfortable, finding what you want to be doing, finding what you're comfortable with, and finding your ways to align your logical self with your emotional self. Because I think typically people on the average are good, most people are good. People aren't really out there in the world trying to be bad or trying to hurt other people. But sometimes people's logical state and their emotional state don't line up. And sometimes that results in lashing out, it results in anger, it results in all sorts of things that sometimes people don't know how to properly deal with or properly work with. And like learning how to make those as aligned as you can, I find typically results with people being more and more optimistic, more and more aligned with themselves and the people around them, things like that. And it's always a growth thing for everybody. And I think that being on that path at all is astonishing. I mean, so many people, I feel, are not on that path or have not started that path or have no inclination to start that path. And I feel as though I've been on that path for a while and do not feel anywhere near accomplishing some sort of eternal bliss of always being aligned there. I don't think that's even achievable, but I think being on that path at all is amazing. I think starting that journey at all is amazing.
The path never ends.
Yeah. No, it is always more growth. Yeah.
Ro, I still have one finger.
Yep.
But we're gonna hold that aside. We're gonna keep one finger down here for a second.
And I'm excited for that finger.
I want to go back to a few days ago when we became followers of each other on Instagram, and I asked you what your Instagram name was, and can you recall what you told me or how that played out? It has something to do with
it's a reference to a Grateful Dead song.
Okay, and what is it? Or what did you say?
It's Ramble on Row.
Ramble on Row.
The Grateful Dead song is Ramble on Rose. And yeah, so my name Ro, and I'm not sure if I've ever explained this to you either. My name Ro comes from both my masculine and my feminine name. They both start with R-O. So I've just been going by Ro as feeling more in the middle, sometimes fluid between both, but more in the middle of that gender spectrum. But my feminine name is Rosie.
Okay.
So when I was starting to really explore that side of myself, my extremely supportive friends were just sending me songs about roses and about rosies and things like that. And I love the Grateful Dead, love the Dead, and the song Ramble on Rose is an amazing song. So ever since, it kind of took over itself as being my username and my handle for things, Ramble on Row or Ramblin' Row or Ramblin' Rosie. I even have a patch on my backpack that's it's a Grateful Dead logo of a broken wheel with roses all around it that says Rambling Rosie that a friend embroidered for me. Yeah.
When I asked that question, that was an answer I wasn't expecting, which is new information, which is good. So now I need to maybe keep another finger down and finish that thought. Explain better, and this relates to the conversation I had with Mariah, maybe as the conversation is labeled on the podcast, is the fact that you're going with Ro, and you haven't always. Get into that a little bit more. When you made that determination, that was the thing you're going to do.
Yeah. So I was born masculine, still have male anatomy, and have lived most of my life that way. I think I started to come to terms with my queerness and openness to my openness and sexuality to everybody when I was in high school at some point. And as I was getting into college, I was experiencing more of that culture. I came from a pretty small town where that really was not very prevalent at all. My high school girlfriend and I started the Gay Straight Alliance at our school, and we actually got protested by adults who came into our school to protest us the first year that we did a Day of Silence protest, counter-protest of adults in our school. So then the next year they banned adults from coming into the school to protest students. So then all of those parents' kids protested us the second year. So I came from a small town, and when I started to go to college and started to experience more of that, I started to realize that it was more okay than I had been led to believe. My parents and family has always been wildly supportive of that sort of thing and have always made clear that it's completely okay, but that doesn't really change the society that you're coming up in. And as I kept delving into that more and more, at a certain point, Mas and I moved to an even bigger city where we became more involved in that scene of people, in the queer scene in general, and getting to know more and more people like that. So it just sort of kept building from there, and was coming to an understanding that gender, just as sexuality is, just as almost everything is a spectrum. There aren't really black and whites in this world, or at least there are extraordinarily few, very few truths that sort of supersede that black and white rule. And that's something that has been a huge part of my life in terms of self-growth, which is kind of an entirely other topic of being non-duality, of living my life as non-dual as I can. The fact that I'm alive at all means that I'm living in a dual world, so it's not something that can ever be transcended, but trying to live my life as non-dual as possible, and that came from a variety of sources, a variety of teachings. Meditation brought me there a lot. Mindfulness and meditation, and a very big contributor to that for me was psychedelics. And so to just go ahead and scoot all of that non-dual stuff aside to answer the original question, actually, the way that I first really started to come into contact, might be the wrong word, but come into contact with my own inner femininity was, having all of this growth of acceptance and the queer community and gender being a spectrum and the world being a spectrum, and having particularly maybe the most impactful psychedelic experience that I've ever had resulted in one of the most intense and potentially life-changing experiences of that kind that I've ever had, which was literally like looking into the mirror, and the person that was looking back at me was like a feminine version of myself. It looked literally as though like the person that I was if I had been born a male, and the person that I was seeing in the mirror was the person who I would be if I had been born a female. And I had a complete conversation with this person. Like I was like, whoa, okay, like what is your life like? Like what's going on? Like what? And it like literally felt like talking to a person in an alternate universe where I had been born female. And at a certain point in this conversation, I was like, well, what's your name? And she was like, oh, I'm Rosie. And I was like, oh, all right, fair enough. So
that's the first time you heard Rosie, or was this already a thing going on?
No.
The first time it came to you was in this psychedelic experience.
Yeah, where she just told me directly that, and I was like, oh, all right, fair enough. Like, I have no idea. Like, before I had thought about potentially what a name for me could be, or for my feminine self, and like the name that I had floating around in my head was Jess before that, and I was like, oh, I don't know, like that doesn't feel right, because it just feels like just like some name that I've plucked out of the air. Yeah. And then this felt just like literally asking and just being told, and I was like, oh, all right, fair enough, all right, that's what it is, I guess. So then from there, I like after that experience, I really started to try and delve into that more and more and more. I looked into hormone transitioning for quite a while, and I looked and really started to live more that way, live a lot more femininely than I had before, even to the point of shaming my own masculinity, which is something that I've been working on more recently, bringing that around.
Not looking at it shamefully?
Yeah. Recognizing that everybody has a divine femininity and a divine masculinity in them. Everybody does. And that it's no good to shame one or the other. Yeah. And that's what I had been doing. But I started delving into this more and more and more, and for a little while I was going by R, and that didn't quite fit me, oftentimes because it would usually just result in pirate jokes. R. And slowly working through that, and then eventually I sort of just came to this place of Rho. It just really seemed to fit for me, and that's the only name I've been known by for a little over a year now.
And it works. Like for me, meeting you, I didn't give a ton of thought to, wait, what does that stand for? What is it short for? I did learn coincidentally what your given name was, and you don't need to share that if you don't. I don't know how you. I think you're trying to have you trying to detach yourself from that fully?
See, that's also part of the not trying to shame the masculinity side of myself. In terms of I am very happy to share that my feminine name is Rosie, but sometimes causes me more ire to share that my masculine name is Robert.
Yeah.
But coming to terms with accepting both of those as being sort of like two sides of myself, not shaming one of them just because it was the way that I have been living most of my life.
You learned a lot as Robert, and then you experienced the Rosie situation from that day forward, and now you're Ro. And Ro's pretty cool.
Yeah, oh, thank you. It was definitely a very big transitioning time, regardless of it being a chemical transition through hormone therapy or anything like that.
Have you haven't done that?
No, I've considered it many times, and right now I have no plans to do it. But it's something that I keep thinking about. It usually just comes down to the thought of shaming one side or the other, and just accepting where I'm at for the most part, is the reason why I haven't. And the potential side effects that come with doing it are great enough that I've thought, well, I can either accept where I'm at or potentially deal with these very harsh consequences that aren't necessarily common but can happen, that would then result in a much worse experience of life just because I'm uncomfortable in my body, and that it's quite likely that even if I did go on that therapy, I would never, that's not what's going to make me feel comfortable in my body.
Okay. 3 fingers now. Maybe it should be 4. I might have already forgotten one. Can you tell me what the psychedelic was that you had this experience on?
That time and most of my most intense psychedelic experiences have been with LSD.
Okay.
LSD or DMT are the 2 biggest impactors to my life, I would say. LSD, DMT, or MDMA are the 3 biggest impactors to my life. I would say MDMA might be the first in terms of most impactful to my day-to-day life psychedelic that I've ever taken. But, yeah.
I've never had any experiences in any of these, but I've heard enough conversations of people that have or talking about it. Now having this conversation with you, it's slightly more prominent in my mind that at some point in the right situation, right, you want to be in a safe space or with people that you trust.
Yeah.
And none of this, the legality of all this is probably kind of not really maybe not a concern for you, but it's still a thing.
Yeah. Not too much of a concern for me. and that also definitely is coming from a place of privilege, that I'm not typically a major target for that sort of thing. Certain other people can be. But, I've never been a seller of psychedelics. I've never been a distributor or a producer beyond what I'm using myself. So it's never been too much of a concern for me. People have all sorts of tactics to try and get around the legality that don't really work. Swim is a popular term in the psychedelic community. It stands for someone who isn't me. So when you're telling a psychedelic experience, you say, oh, swim experience this, because it's someone who isn't me, and that doesn't protect you from the legality side of things. But I don't know, whenever it comes to this sort of thing, I've just always kind of counted my blessings as being like, the DEA has bigger fish to fry than one person taking psychedelics for spiritual growth.
And this is, part of the legal system where this is something you're choosing for yourself, to do yourself. It's not harming anyone. These are things that, if not legalized, should be decriminalized.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine we agree on a lot of things in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay, other fingers. What do we got here? This one, I want to cover it because when I asked you a question a while ago, we never got to it, but I don't want to totally skip it. When I asked you about the Instagram, there's something about just another hippie or something you said that was your name at one point. I wanted to get back to that moment. Well, I don't know exactly if that was your former Instagram name or if that's a name you had on something else.
No, probably just in reference to it being a Grateful Dead name.
Okay.
Coming to terms with being a hippie has been a growing process because you don't necessarily want to align yourself with any group of people because it can kind of make you feel like you're stuck into that group of people. But at a certain point, I've kind of been like, well, you're a person that takes a lot of psychedelics and listens to a lot of jam bands. Just let people call you a hippie. It'll be fine. Just don't worry about it.
See, I don't call anyone a hippie. I don't think. Maybe somehow it's come up at some point. I don't think I would align with that group if there was a group that I was aligning with. That word, I think it was very prominent like in the 70s probably. And not that it's totally disappeared, but you're aware of it and you brought it up that day and it kind of got my mind going. Like, what if you are a hippie or you're not a hippie, what does that matter? Or I don't know.
I think it's a term that I feel like I'm hearing more and more. Typically in people reclaiming it for themselves rather than it being used in the stigmatized way that it has necessarily been used. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but I do like it in the way of like. Certainly, I don't like every hippie, but if somebody came up to me and said like, "Oh yeah, like I'm a hippie that's doing these things," right off the bat, I would be like, "Okay, we're probably aligned on a lot of things.
Okay,
we probably have a similar idea about like some things. Like we probably have some similar ideas about consciousness. We probably have some similar ideas about spirituality. We probably have some similar ideas about openness and freedom that we can. It's almost just like a marker to just know that we might have some things in common. The same way that like if someone describes themselves as a sports fan, you don't know that they like all the same teams as you. You don't know that they like sports in the same way that you do, but you understand that there's some things that you probably align on or some common ground that you can start to have a conversation about. The same with any sort of group identifier. Like someone describing themselves as being someone who likes hunting or someone who's into guns or someone who is anything. Any group identifier is just a way to start connecting the pieces.
Yeah, when you initially connect with someone, a part of that connection is typically something that you have in common that you can build from. And if someone identifies as a hippie to you, you kind of know with a couple of things that you could start talking about and make that connection.
Yeah, it's not usually the way that I immediately introduce myself, and I think it's partially still because of the stigma around the word. But I think that it is something that is sort of like a puzzle piece identifier for a lot of people. Like I think, like on my my workaway profile for travel, I think my intro line is I'm a consciousness forward free thinker and lover. Which is like, if you're a hippie, you get what I'm talking about. Like it's just saying, it's maybe just saying hippie in a slightly different way, or with a slightly different choice of words. Yeah.
I've totally neglected this to this point. I have one more finger, and then I think after that we'll get to my personal growth and being wrong segments. But before that, let's do that. You've been traveling. You're 4 months now in Europe.
Yep.
Share a story about that. Something that just really is something you're going to keep for a long time or forever. Something that's happened in these 4 months that brings. I'm sure there's many, but that brings a sense of what you've been up to for 4 months to a reality for me right now.
So the first thing that immediately springs to mind for sure is this beautiful piece of property in Bulgaria. Moss and I spent 3 months in Bulgaria, which was the literal maximum of our stay without getting a visa. And I have plans to return to Bulgaria as soon as my 90 days out of the country are up so that I can go back to this place. When we first went to Bulgaria, we worked at a hotel/farm for about a month and a half, and enjoyed our time there. All sorts of experiences there that I don't need to get into, but at a certain point there was a bit of a communication breakdown with one of the owners of the place, and slowly started to degrade our experience a little bit to the point where we were like, you know what, like we should just be looking for somewhere else to go. And there was this neighboring project who we had met multiple times just by being there to begin with, and we're like, they seem great, and really like the only reason that we hadn't have gone there earlier was just because of the like they don't have much electricity, they don't have running water, only use compost toilets, and it was like, we've just been choosing to be comfortable here at the hotel, but we're not having as good of an experience here, so let's go to this place. And it ended up just being the absolute most amazing, magical place with people that align themselves in a way, to me, that resonates on an extreme level. I think being around people that you don't align with is one of the most beautiful things in the world. One of the biggest things that can lead to growth. But being around people that just like immediately you're just like people that are on the same level as you, to the point where immediately you're just both learning things from each other. Like it feels like two magnets getting closer and closer together and like building up this like spiraling energy of constant information exchange between everybody involved. And it just feels like constant upwards growth. And it's just this beautiful property on a lake in Bulgaria, with one solar panel and one shitty battery. So like as soon as nightfall comes, there's just no more electricity. But during the day, you can charge your devices or whatever you need to do, and that's pretty much the extent of it. You can use Wi-Fi during the day. And then all of their water that they use is rainwater for washing dishes and washing yourself. And then you can go into town with a big water jug to get water from the mineral spring that is everywhere in Bulgaria. They're called chesmas, and it's just because there's so many mountains in Bulgaria. They have all of these fountains that are just spring-fed mineral fountains that are beautiful, purified water, and everybody goes there for their drinking water. Everybody has these big 2-3 liter jugs that they fill up with water from the chesma. And we stayed there for only, I think, about 3 weeks. They have 6 dogs. And when we were there was only one other person who was staying there, and we were actually alone there for a few days in between. There's like 2 main owners of the place. One of them was leaving before the other one got back, so we were there watching the place for like 3 days. And it was just the absolute, one of the most amazing experiences I've had being on this property, being so in touch with everything going on, being in touch with these animals, being in touch with the land, and learning so much from everybody there, everybody involved. It's where I got the phrase, uncomfortability breeds comfortability, because not having a warm shower suddenly makes you realize all of the comfort that comes in just having warm water at all to wash yourself off with a rag.
Yeah.
Like suddenly that feels like the most comfortable thing in the world, because you don't have any other options. Or like not having easy electricity or anything to cook meals suddenly makes every meal that you make, it takes more work, and that makes it so much more delicious, because it's like you've put so much more work into it. The discomfort has bred a new type of comfort from it. So it's a place I'm really excited to go back to. And I'll be going back in the spring as things are blooming, rather than in the winter after everything had been dying off. So I'll be able to see it in like a little bit of a new season and help out with planting in the spring and things like that.
So this will be your final stop before returning back to Minnesota this summer?
Yep. It'll be my last long stop.
Okay.
I'm doing like a week stopover in Morocco on my way back.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that.
So cool. Well, you've found this magical place for you that really matches what you want to do and experience. And I like that you can explain that. So I have a better understanding that that's probably not the place that I would find to be my favorite place. I'm sure I'd learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
I'd imagine for me and for anyone, there's some place, something like this that we can find in the world that we're not currently having.
Oh yeah.
That brings us much closer to what we really want.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to be seeking it and give yourself an opportunity to find it.
Yeah, being open to it. Yeah.
So my finger, the last thought that I've been holding for probably an hour, and you can help me with this. Maybe we have the personal growth and being wrong coming up, but you mentioned anxiety earlier, and it ties. Anxiety ties into something from the past, leading our minds to go kind of a little overboard. Is this something that we should tackle right now, or should we get into it with my final segments? Where does it best fit in?
Well, probably my answer for personal growth probably has a lot to do with it.
Okay, well, let's move forward to the personal growth segment.
Yeah.
And a story from your life that demonstrates you growing as a person.
Yeah, so as I think I kind of alluded to in a couple different ways throughout this conversation, both with the most impactful psychedelic experience that I've ever had, as well as feeling this disconnect between your logic and your emotions. For me, I found that to be one of my biggest sources of anxiety. Besides anxiety about worrying about things and about worrying about the future, worrying about the past, one of the biggest things was that, I feel all of these emotions where I'm upset, and logically I don't understand why I'm upset, and that can only lead to more frustration. It's just a downward spiral of being like, well, why are you thinking that? You shouldn't be thinking that. Well, but I am thinking that. It's like, oh, damn it. Okay, now what do we do? At a very low point in my life, it was just after I had moved back from the bigger city where I had moved with Moss, and I had moved back to Duluth, where I then lived for the next year and a half before coming on this travel, where I went through some of the most intensive personal growth that I have in my life. When I first moved back, it was one of the lowest points that I can remember, at least in my adult life. And I felt very stuck, and I was really stuck for maybe like a month after moving, and was just like, this is no good. Like, I feel stuck. I recognize that I'm stuck. Like, I need to keep doing something about this. And I started doing some research and reading into MDMA as therapy. MDMA is the pure form of ecstasy or Molly, but without any additives. Ecstasy is usually MDMA mixed with cocaine or some other amphetamine or something like that. MDMA is the pure form of it. And right now it actually has breakthrough status, according to the FDA, for treatment for PTSD. Its nickname is the acceptance drug. It can make you think about things that you don't feel acceptance for and suddenly feel acceptance for them. So in doing my research, I was reading all about these PTSD patients, and that's what they've mostly been doing because that's where they've been getting the funding to keep doing this research. Yeah. But the way that they structure these sessions is a person who is treatment resistant to PTSD, other PTSD treatments, who feels it is debilitating their average life, have been going into these studies, and they have 3 regular psychotherapy sessions, and then they have 1 MDMA session with that psychotherapist who, while under the influence, leads them through their experience that they have the trauma about. Then they have a month break, and then they do it again. And they have a month break, and then they do it again. And then they have another psychotherapy session afterwards to sort of analyze what growth had occurred. The most recent study that I've seen about this was actually analyzing 200 patients a full year after this therapy had undergone. When the therapy happened, all of them, literally 100% of the 200 patients were saying, this was a positive experience. I liked this experience. Like, this was good. A full year later, they went back and they re-questioned all 200 patients. 100% of them said that it had a positive impact on their life. 76% of them no longer even qualified as any amount of PTSD.
Wow.
Yeah, it literally breakthrough status drug. And I was reading this research and I was like, oh my God, like the acceptance drug, like this amazing therapeutic drug. And I'd maybe done it once or twice in my life and had been like, oh yeah, like this is making me very emotional and very happy, but I'm taking it in like a party setting or something where I'm, just putting that energy into dancing or into interacting with people or into making out with people. And
well, that's fun too.
Yeah. All good experiences, but I was like, oh, okay, so like clearly I understand that there's some sort of potential for this. And I was like, well, I can't get a psychotherapist to do this for me. This is still illegal, and it's also I can't afford therapy. So what am I going to do? So I started to write down in my journal anytime that something was really bothering me, especially any thought that just kept ruminating over and over again. I would just write it down and write it down and write it down and write it down until I had this like big list of things. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to try and structure this just like the PTSD treatments, where I'm going to do a session, wait a month, do another session, wait a month, do another session. So October 20th was my first session, and it felt great. It felt great to look through my list and be like, oh yeah, like, wow, this feels great. And then like the next day I was like, oh my God, I still feel terrible. Like this didn't help me at all. Like what? And doing a little bit more research, and it was like, well, the reason that they do those 3 sessions is because not everybody clicks the first time around. Like they do 3 times because some people take 2 times, some people take 3 times. Most people will get it within 3 times, where suddenly that acceptance kind of clicks, and it's all about integration into the rest of your life. Yeah. It's not about the experience itself. It's about how you bring that experience into the rest of your life. So November 21st was the most impactful experience I have ever had in my life. It was the day that things clicked for me. And it was the day that, the next day I started doing all of the things that I knew were good for me that I wasn't doing before. It was the day that I started doing yoga every day, and I started meditating every day, and I started journaling every day. And it was the day that I started to look for a new job because I didn't like the job that I was in. It was the day that I started making that purposeful difference in my life. It was the day that I started cooking for myself again. I love cooking for myself. I just wasn't doing it. I knew that I liked doing it. I just wasn't doing it. And it was that experience that really just clicked things in my head and set off a chain of events, a chain of experiences that were all in spiritual growth and personal growth that all led to me growing more in that year than I feel like I ever have before, of just constant upwards growth, constantly pushing myself and constantly feeling good about it. I mean...
So that may be, for you, that was what it took to get the positive momentum you seem to have needed to begin to do these things that you knew you should do.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the only way, but that's a way to do it. And what it really comes down to is the things that we know we should be doing. Once you start doing those things, the momentum can and will carry you to do more, and you're just going to continue to feel better about your existence.
Even since that experience, I mean, talking with friends and talking with other people who, you hear people say it so clearly, and it doesn't seem all that crazy because you've lived your life I've lived my life that way too. But I would hear a friend being like, "Oh yeah, I love yoga. It makes me feel so good. I love exercise, but I just I don't do it. I don't have the time for it." And then just thinking we're just hanging out right now. What do you mean you don't have time for it? You have time for it right now. Right now, you have time for it. Let's do it right now. Just start doing the thing. As soon as you start doing the thing, you'll realize why the thing felt good in the first place. Yeah. It's not about the experience to set you off. It's about starting to do the thing to set you off. And certainly I'm not a proponent that psychedelics are for everybody. They're not. But I feel like a lot of people just need something that will just get them in motion, just start doing the thing. Most people know what's good for them. Most people just aren't doing it.
Whatever you're doing right now is leading you to be the person you are right now. So something needs to change to get the momentum shifting, and that is it for you. Maybe there's a variety of other things you could have done that could have also done it. Yeah. I don't know. We don't know that. We'll never really know that.
Yeah.
But know that you found something that you could do differently that led to something clicking in a way it hadn't before. And now seems like being around you for a week, you're in a pretty good mood most of the time, and and you're living your life the way you want to, and you're a fairly happy person.
Yeah. I think so. I really like the words that you just said. What you're doing right now leads to the person that you are right now. I think that is a phenomenal summary of that. What you're doing right now leads to the person that you are right now. All you got to do is start.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Now let's go to the being wrong segment. Being wrong, something you were wrong about in the past, really about changing your mind, changing your actions, changing something drastically from the previous version of yourself to now. What's a story that comes to mind when I bring up that topic?
Yeah, so the thing that comes to mind is kind of when I was at that one of the lowest points in my adult life, when I moved back up to Duluth. And I'm sure Moss talked about this in your conversation, but when we started doing polyamory, we had broken up for maybe 2 or 3 months where we were like, I knew that logically polyamory made sense to me, but the emotions were not there. They're still not always there, but they really were not there. I was really overwrought with jealousy and overwrought with over comparisons and worry and anxieties and fears
polyamory, loving many, like
Yeah.
being in loving relationships, romantic, sexual, however it goes,
Yeah.
with more than one person at a time. Maybe not like at the same time, but as a part of your life.
Right. And my parents have always had an extremely codependent relationship, and coming up, like, that's just what I knew relationships to be monogamous, to be relying on one another wholeheartedly, to be putting your will into the other person in the relationship, which is not healthy. And even then I knew that that's not healthy. It's just like where my emotions were. It was the ultimate disconnect from logic to emotion, because logically I could look at all of this and be like, well, that's not healthy. Polyamory makes sense. Of course it makes sense, but the emotions just aren't there. The emotions aren't backing that up. The emotions aren't aligning there. Like, what can I possibly do about this? And it grew to a point of being like, well, I guess, like, I can't do anything about this right now because the emotions are just too overwhelming to deal with this. And, like, I guess, like, this just needs to be the end, which is a ridiculous notion to me now. That, like, I think it would take something astronomical to stop any sort of connection between me and Moss. It just seems completely infeasible to me, and it seemed infeasible to me then too, but it was like, well, I can't deal with everything else that's going on, and I just need to not be there for a while. And it ended up, of course, as everything is perfect, because everything led to the moment where we are now. Mm-hmm. And going through that experience is what led me to my place of personal growth, and to a growth of myself rather than a growth relying on another person, or relying on growing for another person or with another person or in line with another person, and genuinely growing for myself rather than for someone else. But I mean, when I left, I really did think, I was like, okay, like, I guess that's it. Like, this incredible biggest love of my life is just like, okay, like, I guess that's it. I guess that's where we call it. Like, I guess now it's time to go do something else, go be by myself for a while, or whatever. And, you know, that's where I was wrong. That, like, I don't think that connection could ever end, and I don't think that walking away from it is the right move for me now. Like, if something like that happened now, walking away from it or hiding from it wouldn't be the way that I deal with it. It was the right thing for me then, in the sense that it led to everything else that led to now. But, you know, that was a major point of change.
Me trying to understand this, you were wrong thinking that there wasn't a way for this great connection, great relationship to continue in a new way, that you could feel okay about it in this new way, and you could still have it, maybe not constantly, maybe differently, maybe there would be some jealousy you'd have to deal with, but you could continue to have this great relationship in a way that was not traditional, and maybe had you feel a little weird in ways you didn't like, but it could work, and you can make it work in some way and just keep it alive as long as it's there. Right.
Because that's all there is. Discomfort breeds comfort, and doing the thing that's uncomfortable and stepping into the uncomfortable is sort of like maybe the ultimate lesson that came from that, because it was the ultimate uncomfortable thing to step into, that complete transformation. But it ended up being the most comfortable thing. You know, I wouldn't want anybody to ever love me out of obligation or expectation. And I wouldn't want anyone to pretend like they don't love somebody else out of obligation or expectation to me. I would rather walk out that door right now and have Moss tell me that they never want to talk to me ever again, than to live even a single moment where we're not actively choosing to be around each other. And I don't think that's going to happen. So far, it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But if it did, I would much rather that happen than have someone stick around because they feel obligated to, or expected to, or to have someone pretend like they don't love somebody else because they're expected to be monogamous or obligated to be monogamous. That's stifling. That's not the way that life is meant to be lived. And even if it's uncomfortable, it breeds comfort. It breeds the comfort of feeling completely confident in our connection, more confident than I ever did when we were monogamous. I mean, I was worried all the time that I was, screwing everything up, or that I was not being the proper monogamous partner. And then I was like, oh great, I'm not being the perfect monogamous partner. I'm being exactly who I am in every moment, and we still love each other incredibly. Discomfort breeds comfort.
My opinion on this was shared with Mas in the episode I recorded just yesterday. That'll probably precede this episode in the chronology of the People I Know Show podcast. Spent a week with you now, Ro. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've gotten a lot closer. I think things that might change in my life by spending some time with you or you and Mas is, based on this conversation, I'm probably more likely to look at a camping experience differently and be open to that again.
Yeah.
I'm slightly more likely to do some sort of psychedelic thing at some point. And traveling for a long amount of time between the two of you, I think that's slightly more likely to happen. There was one more thing that I think I was thinking about a minute ago, and then it escaped me. Well, I need to probably jump into that further. I mean, the thoughts have been there that this is going to work, but knowing people that are living that experience.
Yeah.
I think me having this conversation with you and with Mas, and then me pointing these conversations, if I can't explain it well enough with an individual, okay, listen to this.
Yeah.
And then you'll kind of know closer to where I'm at. And I don't want it to just be, I want more people to understand this. I love that you've shared your perspective and Mas's.
I think it's important. I think it's important for people to realize that it's not always easy. Like, that was a very big thing for me when diving into it, was that I had this expectation that everyone just thought it was this free and easy thing, and everyone felt great about it, and everyone felt total love all the time, until I listened to it was one other podcast where somebody was like, oh yeah, oh my god, the jealousy is so intense, the jealousy is overwhelming sometimes, but it's all okay. And just be like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's all okay, all right, great, yeah.
We're humans, we're gonna feel jealousy for a variety of things, and that's one of the things that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I thought of the other thing.
Yeah.
Perfect way to end.
Yeah.
I am dramatically more likely to stop at a vegetable stand near me this summer and spend some time there. And
that's perfect.
And it might not be yours. You might be a few hours away. Who knows how the geography works. But I'll stop at one, and I'll think about you when I do that.
Yeah, talk to him.
Ro, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the past week. We're departing each other tomorrow. I'll see you sometime. We don't know when, but whenever it is, it'll be pretty cool.
Sure we'll see each other again.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.